تتكلم عن قطع علاقاتها الدبلوماسية مع إيران.
إلى لغة الإنصار السود وانقلاب السادة بالأيام.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's top stories. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnout meets with Free Patriotic Movement founder Michel Aoun and Rabie and reiterates Hariri's keenness on holding presidential elections. Syria's government tells a UN envoy it is ready to take part in Geneva peace talks scheduled for January 25th, but says it wants to know which opposition figures are participating. And Israeli troops shoot and killed 2 Palestinian men who tried to stab soldiers at a checkpoint in the occupied West Bank. According to the Israeli military, part of a wave of violence now in its 4th month. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnout says Free Patriotic Movement founder Michel Aoun understands the crises Lebanon faces requires the reactivation of government. Mashnout was speaking after a meeting with Aoun and Rabie without indicating if the FPM ministers would attend next week's cabinet session. Aoun in October vowed that the FPM ministers would boycott all cabinet sessions until a new army chief and military council are appointed. However, the party later said it would attend cabinet sessions scheduled to tackle the garbage crisis and followed through with that commitment last month when ministers agreed on a proposal to export the country's waste. Mashnout's statement comes a day after Prime Minister Tamam Salam called on ministers to attend a cabinet meeting next week with 140 items on the agenda. March 14 youth groups and student organizations are showing support to Madaya residents in Syria as thousands of babies, elderly and sick people are in life-threatening situations. March 14 are blaming Hezbollah for the situation in Madaya. Activists, they say, are intending to launch a solidarity campaign with Madaya to prompt a direct Arab international action to stop Hezbollah's atrocities against children. Calling Hezbollah's actions a premeditated crime against humanity, youth organizers stress the need for international intervention to save civilians from eventual party and Assad genocidal terrorism. Radical solution in Syria and Madaya lies in eliminating Assad's despotic rule and eventually the ouster of Hezbollah and other militias out of Syria, according to youth and student organizations. They're saying international relief convoys must be immediately allowed into the besieged city, and they concluded that overcoming oppression is inevitably well at hand. At least 10 people were killed in Russian airstrikes on a prison complex run by Al-Qaeda Syrian affiliate in the country's northwest. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the strikes hit an Al-Nusra Front building which lies near a popular market in Madat al-Numan in Idlib province. The building housed the group's religious court and a jail. Observatory head Rami Abdurrahman says the dead include prisoners and Al-Nusra fighters and could include civilians who had been at the market. Now, dozens of people are also wounded and many remain trapped under the rubble. Russian warplanes have been conducting airstrikes in Syria since September 30th against the ISIS group and other terrorists. Syria's government told the UN envoy it is ready to take part in Geneva peace talks scheduled for January 25th, but says it wants to know which opposition figures are participating. Foreign Minister Walid al-Maalem, who met UN envoy Staffan de Mistura in Damascus, also demanded a list of groups that would be classified as terrorist. The Geneva talks are part of an international bid to end the 5-year conflict that has killed an estimated 250,000 people. The plan for a hoped-for ceasefire envisages defining terrorist groups in Syria, one of the toughest issues facing diplomats today. The Syrian government views all the groups fighting to topple President Assad as terrorists, including rebels represented in a recently formed opposition council tasked with overseeing negotiations. Syrian rebels and opposition politicians have expressed doubts over whether the peace talks will begin as planned. Earlier this week, they told the Mistura the Syrian government must stop bombing civilian areas, release detainees, and lift blockades imposed on opposition-held areas. Israeli troops shot and killed 2 Palestinian men who tried to stab soldiers at a checkpoint in the occupied West Bank, according to the Israeli military. They said this was part of a wave of violence now in its fourth month. The soldiers were not injured in the confrontation at Bakoat checkpoint in the northern West Bank, and Israeli forces did thwart the attack and shot the assailants. The Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed the 2 men were dead. Palestinian ambulances could be seen near the checkpoint following moving the bodies of those killed, while Israeli soldiers temporarily closed access to the area. Commentators say the surge in attacks has been fueled by the collapse of U.S.-sponsored peace talks in 2014, the growth of Jewish settlements on land Palestinians want for a future state, and Islamist calls for the destruction of Israel. Also stoking the violence has been opposition by some Muslims to increase visits by Israelis to Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque complex, which is the third holiest site in Islam and is also revered in Judaism as the location of 2 biblical temples. Coming up next, 3 tourists are wounded in an attack on a hotel in the Egyptian Red Sea resort of Hurghada. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news on Future Television. Egypt's top appeals court upheld a 3-year prison sentence for President Hosni Mubarak and his 2 sons for corruption. It was not immediately clear, however, how long Mubarak would remain in detention. Both of his sons were set free in October, with time served taken into account. Mubarak is 87 years old and has spent most of his time in a military hospital since his arrest in 2011, months after his ouster in a popular uprising. In May, a court sentenced him and his sons to 3 years for having embezzled $16 million, or 14.7 million euros, from funds meant for the maintenance of presidential palaces. They were fined that same amount and an extra 21 million pounds. Charges against Mubarak, who ruled for 3 decades, had been dropped in a separate trial for the killings of protesters during the uprising, and the prosecution has appealed that verdict. Still in Egypt, 3 foreign tourists have been wounded by assailants who attacked a hotel in the Red Sea resort city of Hurghada. The Security Information Center of Egypt's Ministry of Interior said in a statement that 2 Austrians and a Swede had been injured while the attackers were trying to escape the scene on Friday. One of the assailants was killed by security forces and another was in custody. The statement says the attackers were armed with an air gun and knives, and an investigation was underway. The assailants arrived by sea to carry out the assault on the beachside Bella Vista Hotel, but security forces repelled the assault, according to sources. Iraq denies claims made by Ankara that its soldiers on a controversial base near the northern city of Mosul killed 18 jihadists after coming under attack. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan himself announced on television on Friday that the Islamic State group had tried to infiltrate the base in the Bashika area. He said Turkish troops there to train Iraqi forces repelled the attack, killing 18 ISIS members. The Joint Operations Command in Baghdad, however, flatly denied any such thing had happened. A colonel in the Kurdish Peshmerga forces that control the area also denied the Turkish base had come under attack. He says ISIS has fired some mortar rounds in the area, but not at the base specifically, and that the response to the routine attack was handled by the Peshmerga. Iraq argues that Turkey deployed troops and hardware in Bashika without asking Baghdad in what was therefore a violation of national sovereignty. On to the United States, where President Barack Obama is praising U.S. car makers for strong industry results in his first weekly address. Automakers on Tuesday set a new U.S. sales record for 2015, even as December sales fell short of expectations, and most forecasters said sales should rise to another record this year. For a full year in 2015, U.S. sales hit a record of 17.47 million vehicles, breaking the 17.41 million vehicles in 2000, according to Autodata Corp.
Hi, everybody. 7 years ago, the American auto industry was on the brink of collapse. Plants were closing. Hundreds of thousands of workers were getting laid off from jobs that had been their ticket to a middle-class life. And as the pain spread across the country, another 1 million Americans would have lost their jobs in the middle of the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. Some said it was too late to turn things around, but I refused to turn my back on so many of the workers that I had met. Instead, I placed my bet on American workers. I placed my bet on American manufacturing. In exchange for help, we demanded responsibility. We said the auto industry would have to truly change, not just pretend that it did. We got labor and management to settle their differences. We got the industry to retool and restructure. Everyone had some skin in the game. Our plan wasn't popular. Critics said it was a road to socialism or a disaster waiting to happen. But I'd make that bet again any day of the week, because today the American auto industry is back. Since our plan went into effect, our automakers have added more than 640,000 new jobs. We've cut the Detroit area unemployment rate by more than half. The big three automakers are raising wages. 7 years ago, auto sales hit a 27-year low. Last year, they hit an all-time high. Later this month, I'll visit the Detroit Auto Show to see this progress firsthand, because I believe that every American should be proud of what our most iconic industry has done. It's not unlike what America overall has done these past 7 years. Our businesses are now on a 70-month streak of job creation, with more than 14 million new jobs in all. We've revamped our schools and the way we pay for college. We've made historic investments in clean energy and put ourselves on a path to a low-carbon future. We've brought more than 17 million Americans into our healthcare system, seen healthcare prices grow at the lowest rate in 50 years, and covered more than 90% of our people for the very first time. We've even cut our deficits by nearly 75% in the process. The point is, America can do anything. Even in times of great challenge and change, our future is entirely up to us. That's been on my mind while I'm writing my final State of the Union address. And on Tuesday, I'm going to talk about the choices we have to make to set this country firmly on an even better, brighter course for decades to come. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel, backed a sharp toughening of expulsion rules for convicted refugees, saying that even those who have been given suspended sentences should also be required to leave Germany. If a refugee flouts the rules, she said, then there must be consequences, and that means that they can lose their residence right here, regardless of whether they have a suspended sentence or a prison sentence. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has condemned the removal of portraits and photos of his predecessor from the National Assembly. Speaker of the newly installed parliament ordered them to be taken down after the opposition landslide victory in parliamentary elections in December. But pro-government protesters have been on the streets calling for images of Chavez to be put up on every street corner. Jorge Rodriguez, the mayor of Caracas, gave the order at a rally on Thursday to protest the decision. Chavistas have been angered by a video playing nonstop on state media showing the Congress's new leader, Henry Ramos, cracking jokes while ordering workers to haul away a giant billboard of Chavez. At the rally on Thursday outside the National Assembly in Plaza Bolivar, hundreds of government supporters dressed in red swore loyalty to Chavez and independence hero Simón Bolívar. Those are your world news. Now we are ending our bulletin, and I'm going to remind you of our headlines. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnout meets with Free Patriotic Movement leader Michel Aoun and Rabieh and reiterates Hariri's keenness on holding presidential elections. Syria's government tells a UN envoy it is ready to take part in Geneva peace talks scheduled for January 25th, but says it wants to know which opposition are participating. And Israeli troops shoot and kill 2 Palestinian men who tried to stab soldiers at a checkpoint in West Bank. This is part of a wave of violence now entering its 4th month. Thank you so much for tuning into Future Television. We'll be back here tomorrow at 4:20 for all the latest. Have a good night.
تعلن عن قطع علاقاتها الدبلوماسية مع إيران.
بلغة الإنصار السود وانقلاب السادة بالأيام.